Morning everyone, welcome back to Garden Fever. I'm Corey Lefevre. Today I wanted to do an episode on planter pots, and when I first set out to do this video I was going to do terracotta and ceramic pots and plastic pots and kind of give the pros and cons and ways to circumvent some of the cons on each, and it just got to be too much information, so I decided to break it up into two parts. And so today we're going to go over ceramic and terracotta pots, and then the next video I'm going to do will be on the plastics and some of the pros and cons to those. So we'll get started. With terracotta pots, one thing that is, we'll start with the pros, but some of the pros to doing that is they're very porous and absorbent, especially terracotta. When you have glazed pots like this one, it kind of circumvents that porousness if that is not what you're looking for. But a lot of them are very absorbent and very porous, so they air out, they allow air to reach the roots a lot easier than in plastic pots. So that's one of the positives, but that can be also a negative if you're growing something that requires a little bit more water, like let's say tomatoes. If you want to do container gardening with tomatoes and whatnot, you'll have to water them a lot because they'll dry out really quick, and especially with terracotta pots. Another thing is it absorbs the water in, so a pro is where the root ball is, most of the time in the center of the pot. The roots can kind of attach to the sides of it and sponge up a lot of that moisture. But if you're growing things like cactus and various things that require drier soils, and then if it rains, it allows it to drain and evaporate really quick, and that can be a good thing when you're growing things like cactuses and things. One of the thing is it protects better against the elements, so it creates an insulation barrier that's a little bit better than the plastics, because the plastics are a lot thinner. They are heavier though and harder to move. All containers, both plastics and terracotta and ceramics, are movable, and so they're kind of ideal for people that have smaller yards or live in apartments. So that can be a pro to them, because they can, if it's sitting in a spot that in one part of early spring is a perfect spot for it, but as the sun moves and it gets hotter, it gets to be too hot for it, you can move it to a shadier area, which when you put stuff in the ground, you can't do that once it's in the ground. I mean, transplant, but it usually doesn't do very well. So that's one of the pros to both sides, really. And it protects against the elements. So in winter, when it's really cold, they act as like an insulation barrier against the cold. However, you can circumvent some of these negatives. One of the negatives too, as you can see, and I'll give you an up close shot so it's a little bit better, but they're very brittle and they crack like this one. These are only a couple years old. I think this one's about 2 to 3, and this one's only about, well, I've had it about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but I think it's about a year and a half. And as you can see, they just break apart. They're very brittle, and I find with terracotta pots, those are even worse. Now the ones that are glazed hold up better, and there are ceramic pots that contain a stronger clay than terracotta. But what I found is that creates kind of like almost like a barrier, and I over water these. I'll water it once and it takes a long time for this to dry out. So in this particular pot, I've had a lot of root rot, and where these ones, they dry out real quick. I'll go to work in the dead of summer, and I'll come back home and they'll be all wilted and dried out. I'm like, wait a second, it's only been like 8 hours. What happened? You know. So that's some of the pros and cons to them. Also, they are recyclable. One cool thing about terracotta pots is they're made out of clay and natural materials. So if they break apart and get into your soil, it's not gonna be too bad for it. So those are some of the pros and cons. I encourage container gardening for a lot of reasons, because if you move, if you're in a permanent home and you're in a place where you're going to retire and you're going to be there the rest of your life, you know, doesn't really matter. You can, the whole yard is your pot, if you will. But if you're like me, where you're still kind of young and you're not sure if you're going to be in your home forever, or you live in an apartment or a condo, container gardens are great because you can still kind of have a vegetable garden without the space, and you can put it on your deck and your windowsills and things like that, and still kind of grow some vegetables and food and stuff. So that makes it a good thing. Now you also have to remember with container gardening and gardening in pots is it kind of inhibits the roots from spreading very far, and by doing that you kind of dwarf the plants. They don't get as large as they do in the ground. I mean, that's pretty much undeniable. All the plants, I can grow the same species in the same soil, give the same amount of water, and put it in the garden, in the ground, and they'll get much bigger than in the pots. So it kind of miniaturizes them, if you will. So, you know, that's something to consider when you're thinking about what you're going to do. Also, let's talk about some ways to circumvent some of the problems with ceramic pots. Now, with the terracotta and the ones that are a little bit more unglazed, put an Oya in the middle of it, and that'll help concentrate the water at the root zone. You'll get less absorbent, and basically what's going to happen is the Oya is going to sponge up the water and slowly distribute it out at a slower rate. Then it goes through the soil and then hits the outer barrier of the terracotta pot, and then you'll get your evaporation. So it slows that down. You can still have a nice terracotta pot and not lose your moisture as fast as you would otherwise. You can also glaze them and get glazed. Now, like I said, glaze will almost trap the water in there. So it's almost one extreme to the other is basically what I'm saying. So what I've been looking for is pots that are half glazed or partially glazed, and that kind of meets it in the middle, if you will, to where it doesn't trap the water in completely, but it also doesn't allow it to evaporate as fast. Another thing you can do is the color. Now, most terracotta pots are this red, and that's kind of the general, because they're unglazed, it's natural clay, so and terracotta is very cheap compared to some of the other glazes or other clays, so it's most often used. However, if you use partially glazed ceramic pots or terracotta pots that are of a middle color, and what I mean by that is, like, let's say a gray, what that'll do is in the winter it will act as somewhat of an absorbent. It'll attract some sunlight, kind of like what black does. But then in the dead of summer, it's not so absorbing the heat that it ends up burning it or getting too hot. It's right in the middle, so you get somewhat reflectiveness in the summer, so it doesn't heat up extremely hot. But in the winter, it can attract some sunlight, and it will kind of heat it up. Another thing you can do is place them in a part, like up against a wall that's, well, here in the north it's south facing because the sun is more in the south end of the spectrum. If you live in the south or southern regions, it's the exact opposite. But you put it up against a wall, and that way in the winter the sun will radiate against that wall and help protect them, because they're out of the ground and they're more exposed to the elements, and that'll kind of compensate for that heat loss that they're going to get. And then in the summer, it will reflect light. You maybe move it away from that wall. Like I got here, I got all of mine up against this wood thing rather than the wall. And that allows for them to be a little bit more aired out, so they're not quite as hot, you know. And choose a gray color or grayish color. Now that doesn't really go along with a lot of people's aesthetic beautifulness of their yard. That's a word, but it is a more logical way to go. So anyway, I think that about covers ceramic pots, the pros and the cons. I don't really think that there's a right or wrong either way. I think it really matters on what you're growing and what you're wanting your outcome to be, and you kind of got to weigh the options. And that goes for the plastic pots too. And when I get into the next video, I'll explain some of the pros and cons there, and how to circumvent some of the cons with clay or plastic pots, and then you can kind of just take the two and weigh how you feel about it. But anyway, that'll be it for now. I'm Corey Lefevre. Share, like, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments or email me. I'll have my email in the description. And knowledge is power. If you know anything that maybe I forgot, please share it with us. I mean, I'm here to learn from you guys too. It's a two-way street here. I mean, I love teaching people what I know about gardening, but I love it even more when someone leaves a comment or emails me information about something that I don't know and that I get to grow too. So it's kind of a community effort, and I love every step of it. But anyway, I'll let you go for now, and we'll see you then.